Hi everyone, welcome back to the best recapped movie. At the movie's beginning, Clarence, a company accountant, is surprised by two Russian mobsters at his house. Maxim takes him out of the house with a gun without his wife's knowledge and throws him into the trunk of the car by force. They take him to his workplace, where their boss, Oleg Malenkov, sits behind the desk. He says he ran into a small problem, and his boss owes him, but Clarence says I'm just an accountant. Since he knows the password of the safe box, he forces him to open it, and after checking, Malenkov realizes that the safe box is empty. He orders Maxim to put Clarence in the safe box and angrily calls someone and leaves a message explaining that he is disappointed that he could not find money in his office. Instead, he leaves something else for him and kills Clarence. Tomorrow morning, former CIA officer Brian Mills buys a giant panda bear for his daughter's birthday at a toy store. His daughter Kim finds out she is pregnant and seems a little worried. Suddenly, her father rings the doorbell and says that, unlike before, he wanted to surprise her with champagne and a giant panda 3 days earlier. However, Kim is not too surprised and says that if she was a child. Her husband, Jimmy, comes and greets Brian. After his father's explanation, due to the unpredictability of what he did, Jimmy believes that Kim herself is predictable. For example, she goes to the store next to her university every day and buys a peach drink in the 4th row and eats it as a snack, not the 3rd, not the 2nd, only the 4th, because it is cool. Brian says that I would have done the same thing, and then he takes the panda with him and tells Kim that he will replace it with a more predictable gift. After Brian leaves, Jimmy hugs Kim, but she doesn't tell him about her pregnancy. When she opens the fridge, she finds a loving message from her father on the champagne. Outside the house, his ex-wife Lenore calls Brian to ask about his meeting with their daughter, but Brian says it didn't go well and then invites her to dinner. Lenore respectfully rejects his offer and says goodbye. At night, while Brian is cooking dinner, Lenore comes in and surprises him and says that she has changed her mind. After they have a drink, Lenore explains that her relationship with her husband, Stuart, is not going well, and she is confused. She approaches Brian and says she dreams about having a relationship with him, and they kiss. Brian stops and tells her he wants to, but he can't allow himself to do that as long as she and Stuart are together. He says he is going on a 1-month mission, so he gives his home key to Lenore so she can come here whenever she wants to be alone. And Lenore agrees. Then she kisses Brian, takes her bag, and leaves. The next day, Brian is playing golf with his friends Sam, Bernie and Casey when he receives a call from Kim, and she invites him to meet for lunch at a restaurant. Kim says she wants to consult him about a matter she had not planned before. Suddenly, a bold boy at another table is mischievous and throws the food on the floor. She thinks for a while and she hesitates about what she wants to say. She lies to Brian that she wants to adopt a dog and asks for his advice. He also says that caring for a dog is not an easy job, and it is as hard as caring for a child. And Kim starts to think. Stuart meets Brian, and while Brian is making coffee, he suspects that Lenore has been here before. He believes his relationship with Lenore will continue when he is not between them. Brian explains that his relationship with her is based on friendship. And they meet mostly because of their daughter Kim, but Stuart still insists that they shouldn't see each other from now on, and asks him to promise. Shocked, he accepts, and Stuart leaves the house after thanking him. After his morning workout, Brian gets a text from Lenore asking him to meet her at her apartment for some bagels. He goes to a coffee shop to buy bagels, and when he enters to her house, Maxim secretly watched him. Brian enters the house and finds a knife covered in blood on the floor, and when he goes to the bedroom, he finds Lenore on the bed, who appears to have been killed. At the same time, the police arrive strangely, and they ask him to surrender, thinking that he is the murderer. Brian raises his hands but knows he has to do something, so when they try to handcuff him, he overpowers the cops and quickly escapes through the window. In a chase full of stress, he tries not to get caught by the police in a conspiracy they made for him, so he quickly enters a garage, hides under a car, which he already knew, enters the city sewers, and escapes from there. The police are unable to find him, and on the other hand, Brian, who is deeply saddened by the loss of his ex-wife, leaves with sadness. He immediately calls Kim and informs her about the loss of her mother and explains that even though it looks like it was his doing, in fact, he is innocent. He asks Kim to be strong and not to trust anyone and hangs up. Shocked, Kim kneels down and cries, and Frank Dotzler, who is in charge of this case, investigates the crime scene with his men. He wants to check Brian and Lenore's phone information, and the bagels bag catches his attention, and he eats some of it. Brian calls Sam and explains that he did not do this, and of course, Sam believes him. Then he says he needs to go to the hideout and make sure the password hasn't been changed. He enters an abandoned utility warehouse, and by going to the basement, he assembles the necessary equipment and parts of a gun that was hidden separately. Frank also goes to the garage where the police lost him. With his unique curiosity and intelligence, he discovers how Brian escaped from there. He goes to see Stuart, who has returned from a business trip. Stuart explains that he met Brian to talk about his relationship with Lenore. Meanwhile, Kim arrives and is upset that the cops are searching the house, asking them to hold off. Smith, one of Frank's men, secretly puts a microphone under the collar of Kim's jacket. Then, she goes to her mother's room, misses her absence, and cries on her bed. Frank takes Stuart to the cold house to identify Lenore's body, and he starts crying when he sees it. After that, he tells Frank about Brian's past, that he saved his wife and daughter's lives twice in Paris and Istanbul. He believes that maybe this death is not unrelated to those events. However, he emphasizes that Brian is not dangerous, but his world may be possible. After they leave, Brian sneaks into the cold house to see Lenore, touch her face with regret and take a sample of her hair, then he says goodbye to her. Frank warns about Brian's abilities and tells his men that he is a former CIA officer and his daughter is the only way to find him. Then, he asks Garcia and Smith to check Lenore's car's GPS. Therefore, they oblige the parking attendant to show them the location of her car, unaware that Brian arrives at the car a little earlier and manages to take the car's GPS before they arrive. When they arrive, it is too late. In the hideout, Brian finds out by checking the GPS that she went to the gas station before her death, so he goes there. By showing his fake LAPD card, he convinces the security to provide him with the CCTV video. By checking the cameras, he realizes that Lenore was kidnapped here and focuses on the tattoo on the hand's back of one of them. At the same time, Smith and Garcia also go there to investigate, and according to the cashier, they find out that Brian is here, so they quickly reach out and ask him to surrender. They easily handcuff him and arrest him, while Frank is shocked to hear this and calls Garcia. Garcia explains that it wasn't as hard to catch him as he said, but Frank warns him that Brian will trick them, so he orders them to stop the car. In this case, it seems that he guessed right. Brian throws out one of the police officers after opening his handcuffs. He threatens the driver to enter the opposite direction of the road with a dangerous jump. His pursuit continues, and after successive accidents and shootings by police officers, he finally manages to escape from the police. After reaching a safe place, he drops off the driver and continues on his way by taking his gun. Police find him again by identifying the license plate, and the chase continues until Brian is forced to enter the parking lot. From there, he drives the car into the elevator pit, which causes the car to fall. There is a huge explosion, and while everyone thinks he is dead, Brian calls Frank and tells him that he is innocent and wants 2 days to find the killer. Still, Frank explains that even if he is innocent, the court must decide on this, so Brian says, "Good luck," and throws the phone into a bus. Frank gets the information from the cameras, and Brian goes to the hideout and meets Sam. He tells him the whole story and says he wants to attend Lenore's funeral. At her funeral, Frank and his team try to reach the voices until Sam hugs Kim and sympathizes with her, and Bernie tries to jam the airwaves. They lose Sam's voice, and he informs her that her father will visit her and emphasizes that she just to do her daily schedule. Then, Sam points out that she can communicate with her father through the camera on his coat. Frank realizes what team he is facing, so he says it is useless and they are done here. Kim is surprised that Stuart hired some bodyguard, and he insists that it's to protect them, explaining that he wasn't responsible for what happened. In response, Kim tells him that he is responsible for the pain and suffering that her mother endured 2 years ago. She moves to the university and realizes that Garcia is following her. She gets off in front of the supermarket and insults him for following her. Then she goes in to buy and sees a note on the drink in the 4th row that Brian wrote, "Drink me now." Kim do this, throws the hull in the trash can, and goes to the university. On the other hand, Frank calls Garcia at the bagel store to be informed of events. Frank leaves, enters the supermarket where Kim buys drinks, and interrogates the owner. Kim feels nauseous in class, and goes to the bathroom, and Garcia follows her after hearing her voice through the microphone. Frank also searches the trash, and when he finds the hull, he immediately calls Garcia and asks him to find her because she might see Brian. As soon as she enters the bathroom, her father catches her. After discovering the microphone and blocking it, he gives her nausea medicine and says that he had to poison the drink so that he could see her. They hug each other, and Kim cries and informs him that she is pregnant. Brian's blood sugar drops and Kim gives him a chocolate. He assures her that they will find the best way together after solving this issue. After expressing his love for his daughter, he warns her about Frank and says he is a smart cop. Frank arrives at the university and immediately goes toward the bathroom with his men. Kim tells his father about Stuart's strange behavior and that he hired a guard. Then, when they are approaching, he puts the microphone on her jacket and manages to escape before Frank and his men arrive. A little later, they see Brian in the corridors. Still, with the explosion of a grenade, he activates the alarm, and the crowd comes out. He luckily escapes from there by using this situation. Frank interrogates Kim and says that even though he can, he prefers not to arrest her, and she also leaves after revealing the microphone they had planted on her clothes. Stuart and his bodyguards go to Malibu for a business trip. On the road, it becomes clear that Brian is chasing them when suddenly Maxim appears from behind with a van and hits Brian's car. In this conflict, his car crashes, and Maxim makes sure that he kills him by throwing a grenade and exploding the car. After they leave, Brian enters the road and threatens a passerby to convince him that he needs to drive. As soon as he sees the van on the side of the road, he gets out of the car, enters the store, and kills Maxim people one by one. There is a shooting between him and Maxim, and after a hard fight, Brian brings him to his knees and asks him in a Russian accent, "Who hired you?" Maxim, who refuses to reveal his boss, commits suicide. After that, Brian secretly enters Stuart's residence with his car and takes him with him. In a shack by the beach, he tries to get him to talk by torturing him with gasoline. He says he crashed while chased by some Russian men and asks him for an explanation. Under torture, Stuart reveals Malankov's name. He says he owed him in a deal and explains that Lenore became his victim because he could not repay him. He says he told Malenkov that Brian would find him and kill him, and that's why they want to kill Brian now. He says that I'm a dead man. During an operation, Brian, with the help of his friend, stops the police, removes the guards, manages to catch Kim, and takes her with himself. After this incident, Frank warns his agents about Sam, Bernie and Casey's military records under security and special titles and emphasizes that they should take them seriously. He says that, if they are not their best selves, they will never be able to arrest them. He explains that they are not looking to kill, they just want to gather information, except they are always ahead. Inside the hideout, they plan to use Stuart as bait to get to Malenkov, so Brian asks him to tell him everything he knows about him. Stuart points out that Malenkov is a trained assassin who used to be a military member and has skills like him. He made some good deals with him, but they failed in the last one, and he owes him money. Kim is furious that her mother was the victim of one of his deals, but Bernie stops her and calms down with her father's advice. After that, Stuart informs Malenkov in a call that he has prepared his money and will stay with him in the downtown penthouse for the next 1 hour. With Stuart's description of his penthouse and the presence of guards in front of the elevator, as well as the presence of the security team, they devise a plan to break into the building. Frank calls Stuart and informs him that Brian stole his daughter, and he lies that he is in Malibu and will be right back. After this call, Garcia tracks down Stuart and informs Frank that he lied because now he is downtown, so with his orders, the police forces will immediately move there. Bernie is watching them, so he informs Sam about this, and Brian immediately starts the operation. In front of the elevator, Stuart informs the guards that he has come to see Malenkov. After entering the elevator, Casey prevents the security team from being informed by hacking and scanning the CCTV cameras. Brian then attacks the guards in front of the elevator, knocks them out, and asks Stuart to return to the truck because he is done there. While the elevator is ready to open, Casey disables the cameras. Brian immediately attacks the guards and removes them with his unique fighting skills. Heavy shooting begins between him and the other guards, and this time, it is Brian who manages to kill them and finally enters the room where Malenkov is. He faces a barrage of machine guns and non-stop shooting. After that, they engage in a full-scale physical fight with each other, and finally, Brian manages to shoot him with a Colt, and kill him. As Malenkov is dying, he reveals that Stuart tricked them both and that he was the one who ordered the murder of Lenore, then paid him to kill Brian, but since he failed to do so, he now sends him to kill him. Brian is shocked and leaves him to die. On the other hand, Kim checks the messages on Lenore's phone and sees one mentioning going somewhere special, so she tries to inform Brian about this. Suddenly, Stuart understands the issue, takes the gun, shoots Sam in the shoulder, and kidnaps Kim. Brian immediately returns to the parking lot after hearing it. Stuart runs away before the police enter the parking lot and orders his private plane to be ready for him in 15 minutes. The police find Malenkov's body, and when Brian gets to the parking lot, he notices that Sam is injured. Then, he gets into a Porsche and immediately leaves there by tracking his daughter on the GPS. While all the police forces are chasing him, Brian drives fast to save her. Meanwhile, Frank calls him and says that he found out that Stuart killed his wife Lenore for an insurance policy to pay off his debt to Malankov, so he tries to arrest him. However, Brian tells him that the priority is to save his daughter, and he hangs up the phone. Stuart gets on his private plane with Kim and orders it to take off immediately. Meanwhile, Brian moves quickly towards the runway to stop him. As soon as the nose of the plane rises, he goes off the road and disables the front wheels, which causes the pilot to stop due to the explosion. Stuart exits the plane holding Kim hostage, and Brian walks up to him with his gun pointed at him. Kim hits him at his father's hint, and Brian shoots him in the shoulder. It is revealed that when Stuart went to see him, he sent a message to Lenore and deleted it so that they would kill her at the gas station and leave her body there to let it be pretended that he killed Lenore. As the cops approach, Stuart laughs and says that he can't kill him. At Kim's insistence, he won't do it, but warns him that he knows that with the acquaintances and lawyers he has, he'll be out of prison in 3 or 4 years. That's when he goes to him and kills him. Then he releases him and hugs his daughter. After these events, Frank says in his office that he knew from the beginning that he was innocent, right when he saw the bagels that were still hot. This question came to him about whether someone could go buy bagels and kill his ex-wife. Eventually, he was able to solve this mystery. However, they both admit that his trick worked.
You didn't help us out by escaping.
You needed the insurance money to pay Malankov, and by getting me to kill the guy who would kill him.
Almost worked.
Almost.
After a bit of talk, Brian asks if he can go, and Frank says, of course, away with a smile and a handshake. Frank closes Brian's case, and at the movie's end, Kim informs Brian next to Jimmy that they decided to keep the baby, and Kim says that if it's a girl, she will name her. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel.